Hey, hello everybody. This is Don Grusin. This is allstarmusiclessons.com, and I wanted to take you through a couple of things that I've learned to do over the years, over these many years playing this beast. I want to talk about composition. I want to talk about exercise. I want to talk about posture, as you see me slumping over the keyboard. I want to talk about internal kind of well-being, staying in the present time when you're playing. I want to talk about breathing a little bit. But the first thing I want to get to, and I want to talk about my heroes, all of my keyboard heroes, piano player heroes. And I have many of them, and I think they're worth listening to, these guys. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. The first thing I want to do is show you what I do when I approach the piano. And when I come to the piano in the morning or the afternoon, I want to see what's inside me. And so I will just, without thinking about it, start something like I'll do now. I haven't been thinking about what I would do. And I'll play a little lick of some kind of little line. Becomes a song if you don't think about it. And then some variations. So now, if something happens with your hands when you're coming to the keyboard, because built into these hands are automatic finger memories, and we're cursed with them and we're blessed with them. So somebody says an F7th, I play an F9th, what they say, F7. The thing is, if that happens and you can't get away from the habit, the automatic finger memory habit that we all have, then the thing to do is to do a little exercise. And I want to talk about exercises next, so hang around. So I want to show you some exercises that I try to remember to do. It's not important that you exercise every day, but this is really a handy thing to try to get a little more stretch in the fingers. You know, the stretch in the hands, though it comes from the length of the fingers, it also comes from this between the knuckles. So you see these guys with little tiny hands playing these huge intervals. It's because they've managed to increase the distance between the knuckles. So one of the exercises that I think came from a guy named Francis Cook in 1917. I think it's a book called Mastering the Scales and Arpeggios. It's an old classic that all you real piano students would know about. He says do the following. So you play a chromatic line like this, and you play it a couple of times, and then you do this. You play C, G, C, G, C, G, C, G, C. But every finger has to play the next note. So the fourth finger has to play the G, third, second, and the thumb. And you do this and then you do the next key, because it's important to play in all the keys. And if you make a mistake, go back and get it until you get it right. Like I just did. And so forth. And you play at a speed that you can accomplish all this. Don't play faster. Don't try to get done with the exercise. And what happens is, after a while, you'll feel the fatigue in the muscles of your hand and your forearm that are really important, that lead to being able to get those fingers stretched out. And I've gone from an octave to a ninth in, I don't know, 3 or 4 years of doing this. And my fingering is horrible because I never learned. I took private when I was a kid, but I learned mostly on the street. So you'll note that you'll see while I'm playing that I'm making a lot of funny fingering moves, and you'll say, why would anybody play that way? It's just a matter of habit, and if it works, use it. That's my little hint for exercise.
Don, thanks for doing this video, first of all.
My pleasure.
We're excited to have you.
Yep.
And we just want to talk about some of your influences on the piano. Who are some of the people you strongly recommend listening to? And well, let's start there.
Well, all the classical guys first. You know, Vladimir Ashkenazy, you know, the guys. And what you get from listening to them is this really a big goal to try to get to, because they're so fluent in both hands. And then as far as the jazz guys are concerned, I think you should listen to Art Tatum. And then Horace Silver and all those guys from that era. Tommy Flanagan. The more recent guys, my favorite, I guess I would have to say, is Joe Zawinul, although I love Herbie and I love Keith Jarrett. And there's some new guys on the block that I think are really terrific who live in Los Angeles. Otmaro Ruiz, who's from Venezuela, and Mitch Foreman, another stellar player who moved here from New York. So there's some really good guys. My brother, of course, influenced me because I was probably, when I was tiny, he was practicing the piano, and I was absorbing some of that stuff unwittingly. So it's that old nature versus nurture thing. I'd guess half and half, because of my father was a string quartet violin player, so classical player. So we learned a lot of music from him. He was a masterful musician. And Dave played before me, and then if you lived in my house, you had to play the piano. If you were going to be a Grusin, you had to play the piano. So that's how that all kind of happened. Now I'm listening more to guitar players and kind of single line players.
Did you transcribe a lot of solos?
I never did that once.
Really?
No. I used to try to emulate Oscar Peterson's lick, that one that starts in the high register and goes all the way to the bottom of the piano. It's kind of a funky lick that he played over and over again over the years. But no, I never transcribed any solos.
It just came.
I guess.
Just play what you hear.
You play hopefully what's in here.
Right.
Try not to copy too much. I think it's a good idea to play and copy some of your heroes. Bill Evans, the chord changes and the whole touch that he had on the piano is so important to me. So I did emulate that, and I love his changes. But I think there comes a time when you find your place, and it's almost instinctive. And everybody does find their place, you know. This would be the orthodox way of playing. F7th, back to F7th. Now, to the B flat. The beginning again. So you can play, it has to do with where the next change is going to sit. E flat, D, and there's different kind of comfort level with it. Okay, you guys, I want to take you through a little bit of a chord progression, and I'll use the blues that's a little different than what you're used to doing, because I want to introduce the concept of stretching out which chord changes you use in order to get from, for example, F7th. On the blues, you go to B flat 7th. So like just those, let's just talk about those first two chords that are in the blues. So we might do something like, this is off the top of my head because I'm not sure how I would feel right now, but I might want to go chromatically, say from F, E, whatever that is, 7th, flat 5, E flat 7th, D 7th, A flat 7, flat 5, and then G to B flat. So here we go. To the B flat, and then to get back to the F again, we might go to like an E11. Then I'd like a diminish back to 7th. So we go from the B flat to the E11 over an E. It's nasty when it's just sitting there, but it feels good after it resolves. Back to the F7th. Then when we're going to go turn around to get down to the C or to the G. So we go to F, E flat, D7, F sharp diminished, G7, G6 and 7. So it's a F sus, back to the F again. So I'm going to play it, I'll play one time through, and I'll just take my chances, and you got to learn to take yours. F, there's a lot lot of ways to go, and I would experiment by playing whatever chord you want after the F to get to the B flat. For example, you could play at F7, and then you play that chord. Now, go from that chord to find out how to weave your way down to get back to the B flat. So the idea is to not get stuck playing what you think has to be the only approach to this blues playing. In fact, it's true with playing chord changes for any songs. So we might get back to this a little bit later on another tune, because I want to play you some other stuff. So try this thing. Try these alternate changes for the blues, and begin with that. And any key will work. You know, I use F because it falls naturally on me. So now I want to show you something that occurs to me all the time in the recording studio or outside or when I'm listening to other piano players. And the subject is, why do we confine our chords and melodies to this little area in here of about 5 octaves, you know, on the piano? We kind of stay in there partly because maybe we have a keyboard at home and it's only got this many notes on it, 61 notes or whatever that is, or 76 notes instead of 88 notes all the way to the end. And the piano's such a beautiful beast that it can speak at any level. Now, you don't want to play a lot of cluster chords down here. That chord sounds good up here, but it doesn't sound good down there. So there's some rules about not combining too many notes on the bottom end, whereas you can get by with that on the top. Like, you know, you can play all kind of tight cluster chords up in the top. And as you move down, you have to be careful of not having too many clusters, even though they're ringing nicely up here. Not quite as open, and it sounds a little, it's not exactly the dissonance, but it's not as comfortable as those kind of chords are upstairs. So, for example, if the guitar player's playing in this, and the bass is here, the piano player, the best place for him to play, the keyboard player, is not in that same register, but to complement it by playing. So we could kind of simulate that by using the pedals, right? The middle pedal. And then I love this middle pedal. It's really a lot of fun to use for a lot of reasons. And that also opens your brain to using more of the piano. For example, if I play C's and hold down that middle pedal, these C's are going to ring through the piano. But they won't, it's not like holding the pedal down, because I can get rid of that and I still have these guys ringing. So it kind of opens your head to other ways of doing music. You hear the harmonics ring from having these held down. That means that the felts are off those strings, and you can play. And if you put the sustain pedal down, it tends to even open up that chord a lot more. So my feeling lately is to try to find more more sounds that come from outside this little area of these 5 octaves, and it's really fun because it just opens your brain more, and it also gives room to other instruments that you might be playing with. You don't want to play where the soprano sax is playing. You want to play around it. You don't want to play right where the singer is playing unless the singer needs the notes to stay in tune. But you want to find and experiment with different parts of the instrument because it's such a beautiful instrument. I would say anything in the 80s by Joe Zawinul. Anything in the 50s or 60s by Miles and Coltrane. Because I think piano players learn sometimes more from hearing bands where the leader is not a piano player. If the leader's a piano player, you're tempted to go, I guess I better play like that because that's successful and it sounds good. But in fact, I think what it might do is corrupt your own instinct for your own style a little bit. I used to love the 3 sounds, and I used to listen to a lot of R&B in the early days. Also, there's some classical stuff. Michael Brecker did a project with Klaus Ogerman some years ago, which was seminal, I thought, in terms of a classical trained guy like Ogerman writing a long piece, to which he said to Michael, play whatever you want, and that melding of the classical tradition and Michael's improvisational chops, which are among the very best I've ever heard, that led to that was a great record. I would listen to old modern jazz quartet records. Quincy's stuff in the 70s, late 70s. Mellow Madness was a great record. God, you can go on. I like the African guys. Youssou N'Dour has some new product out that's just lovely. The Brazilians, Caetano Veloso and Ivan Lins and Javan and Milton Nascimento and all those guys, they always add something to my knowledge whenever I hear them. And I listen to their music a lot, and I'm always learning something that I didn't quite get before. The Latino end of things, there are so many good players and singers. Spending time in Cuba a few years ago with Frank Quintero, we were deluged by some unbelievably great musicians. There's a band down there called Havana Ensemble, and there are dozens of groups, of course, there. So I think you pick Latin American stuff and you pick Caribbean stuff and you pick African stuff and you learn from the U.S. masters and the European classical tradition guys, and then also pick up stuff that you can hear from Asian culture, like the superb koto music and from Japan and the erhu violin, that one-string violin from China, and there's just so much to listen to, And every time you absorb these new kinds of music, you tend to incorporate it almost unwittingly in your own playing and writing. As a jazz player, I learned to play the melody in the right hand and the chords in the left hand. And I got to thinking, all these guys that play gospel music and that play R&B and now hip-hop are getting used to having a lot of stuff happen on the bottom end that's not typically traditional. And some years ago, because I was hanging around Abraham Laboriel, the bass player, we had a band with Lee Ritenour and those guys, Ernie Watts, Alex Acuna, called Friendship. And at that time, I was interested in trying to find out, what can I do with his left hand besides just playing the chords? So for Abe, I wrote this song that makes use of the left hand. And I couldn't play it when I first wrote it because it's hard. And then finally, what happened as a result of writing the song, the left hand started coming together. So it's that's that song called Water Wings that goes, I'll just play a little piece of it. So anyway, I wrote it in with two purposes. One, I wanted to write the song for him, and the other, I wanted to see if I could get my left hand to work like a classical piano player's hand works, because they're not stultified and stopped by this convention of playing the chords in the left hand and the melody on the right. Another thing I started doing with the left hand, kind of influenced by stuff that pop music people were doing, including including guys like David Foster and other songwriters of pop music, is that they started playing left-hand lines that could play with the bass or just as a kind of tempo pulsing, syncopated pulsing thing with the tempo. So let's see, an example would be what I do with the right hand is I put a note that makes sense in the chord and hold it down, and then with the other fingers on the right hand play the rhythm part. So here, an example. Almost like a cello part in the left hand. And then there's a so the melody's playing on the little finger and the second and the fourth finger, and the chords are played in the middle part of these fingers in the upper parts of this hand, and then the bass has kind of got almost a counter melody to it. And you can make little patterns by trying different ways of using rhythm and part of your hands, the melody in part of your hands, and make the left hand move around a little bit more. And you've kind of invented a whole new way, a whole new style of playing this keyboard. So just try it. Try something like that. Maybe we'll make available at some point some written stuff that you might be able to get so that you can see what the notes are if you wanted to try to copy something like this. But the idea is just to go for it and let the left hand free up from playing just the chords and free the melody hand from just playing the melody, and see what happens. A few years ago, I wrote a piece that I wanted to have my brother Dave play on. That was I play a syncopated part and he plays a little syncopated melody, and I didn't want it to be in 4/4. I wanted it to be in 6/8 or 12/8, so that it had a different kind of more world, maybe more African kind of feel to it. So I wrote this thing called Road Town, which actually came from the name of the capital city of the island of Tortola in the British Virgins. It's a beautiful place, but don't go there. Leave the place alone. You know, it's like one of those pristine spots. And it occurred, because of being there, it occurred to me that rhythm players from all over the world, including pan players from that part of the Caribbean, and bata guys from Cuba, and the balafon players from West Africa and Ghana. All these guys, they all have a way of letting the time go on and not paying so much strict attention to the time and playing around the natural pulses that are inside, sort of a kind of a heartbeat sort of thing. So I started out by playing a pattern that he could play to, and maybe we'll show a little bit more of that later in this lesson. But here's a way of playing. If you thought of 6/8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, this note is on 4, so it's kind of like it would be a backbeat, almost like a snare backbeat. So we go. I don't know how to tell you how to play that way, but if you play with different time signatures, a lot of these things will occur to you naturally, partly because you've heard a lot of stuff like this, and partly because your fingers will get used to certain kinds of patterns. We talked about that earlier, about finger memory. So then I wrote a little melody that goes with that, and I can't play both of them at the same time because it's why I wrote the duet for my brother, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ding, ding. 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we played a bridge. It's a lot of fun to do that with somebody else, and so maybe an idea to explore these issues is to get together with somebody else. It doesn't have to be a piano player necessarily. I was blessed to have the piano player that I was doing with, and having Dave do it. But there's a way to develop this sensibility by writing just part of the part and playing that, and then writing another part and have somebody else play it. It could be a guitar player or a soprano sax or a singer even. And while we're on this business of syncopation, I've got kind of I guess it's a system, and I don't know that I have it because I've been doing it for a long time, of where to put the beats when you're playing anything, where to put the stress points, and where to put the accents. Let me get a little song together and play that for you, and I'll show you about this question of stress points and where the accent should be and how it makes it feel better. And I'll do that right now. This is a song I wrote for an album that I did on GRP, and we did it again for this project called The Hang, which you ought to check out, with a lot of great players and singers. And it's called Makoso Beat. And I got interested in Makossa beat because I was hanging around some African bass players and percussionists, and they were showing me there is actually a style from Mali called Makossa, M-A-K-O-S-S-A. And so I wrote this song called Makossa beat. Now, it's not legitimately African, but it's inspired me to kind of play it and find out where the syncopation differences might be instead of just a regular jazz kind of thing, because I'm much more interested in the big picture, including jazz, but the whole picture of world music, including African music and other places. So anyway, this is the line on Makossa beat, and it's in 4/4. 1, 2, 3, 4. One. Then the bridge goes. Hard for me to play it without everybody being on the band, but the idea is to keep the pulse going and not going. This is basically the chord changes of the A section. B, E, A. Instead of playing it that way, and if you keep the spirit of the rhythm going within you without actually counting or counting out loud or even counting the beats in your throat, you can start varying from it while the pulse is as strong as ever inside. And if everybody's feeling that same way when you're playing with other people, then it's like a heavenly experience when that happens. I wanted to say something else about this song and about the rhythmic thing. You know, a lot of these rhythms that came from Mali and from West Africa, who kind of migrated to the Caribbean, and then there was rhythmic content going on in South America that also migrated to the Caribbean. The Caribbean became kind of a clearinghouse for a lot of stuff, a lot of rhythmic patterns, including reggae, but reggae is just kind of a newcomer to all this because there was like some traditional rhythmic things that were happening before. And the balafon that led to the Makossa beat, this song, and the syncopation that's played. So what I'm getting to is there's kind of a Latin, Brazilian, world music, African kind of combination in music that we're all starting to take advantage of because it's all so it feels so good, and it's different than the usual kind of straight ahead jazz kind of thing that people, including myself, have done over the years. So I think basically the bottom line of this segment is to encourage you to keep the rhythm going inside without having to express it exactly on the keyboard, so that the pulse continues and you can play all around. It sounds like the left hand is going. Where's that left hand going? He's not playing in the rhythmic structure, but that's the charm of this whole kind of music. And so I encourage you to check all that stuff out. And there are many players that do this, and lots of records out there. Voicing, which is about where you put the notes in the chord, really, or how you orchestrate, or how you write string parts. And basically, you learn all this stuff from playing this guy. I used to play the seventh on the top. And then I got, wait a minute, that sounds so cluttered and so forth. So then I'd play the seventh on the bottom. Depends on what's happening with the melody, of course. And then I thought, well, instead of just the basic C7, what about another way of playing it? So I've added another note to it, the chord, which is the ninth. And then I have the seventh, and I have the third and the dominant. Now that's for me, that's kind of a pretty change. And it's got, I like to play a lot of notes close together, as you can see. Here's a chord that's got a F, G, A flat, C, D, F. So it'd be a D minor flat 5, or it'd be a F minor chord, F minor 6 chord. And the existence of these three notes together, you don't want to leave them there for the whole time. You want to resolve all the stuff that's slightly dissonant. So sevenths can be played in so many different ways without just relying on what we learned in the very beginning. There's an appropriate time when you play that chord, but you don't have to always play it. And so I try to find new harmonic combinations by just playing all over the keyboard. That sounds beautiful in this big old piano, doesn't it? Voicing the seventh. And then the flat 5, I use a lot to go to the next change. That F sharp tells the listener it's got to be going somewhere. And usually I think it would go logically here. Not necessarily. And I've gotten used to playing a lot of diminished and half diminished changes to get to the next chord. So here's a little exercise. Find 4 notes down here. Maybe it doesn't matter exactly what they are, actually. So start with these notes. And then change one of the notes. That doesn't work. Change another one of the notes. That works. And then change another note. That works. That works if it's going somewhere. That changes that note. And just find 4 notes and keep varying their combinations, and you'll find all kind of things happen. In fact, a lot of songs are written that way. Jobim, for example, writes, what's that name of that tune? And he plays. And it just opens up your brain to all the alternatives without having to realize exactly which notes, the names of those notes. You don't have to know the names of these notes to hear the difference. Do these little things to start a song, and it can be a really nice introduction, just using 3 or 4 of these notes. So voicing is in the ear of the beholder, but there's so many alternatives, and it's an infinite number of combinations of these guys, and so just play around with it. So we always have to talk about soloing and improvisation, and it's all so personal. But I wanted to give you an example of it. So here's a song that I wrote called "She Could Be Mine." You might even know this song because it's gotten plenty of radio, and it's also on the Hang. But the melody goes. It's got all these chord changes. It sounds like it's already improvised in some ways, and that's maybe some of the charm of the song. But let me just play the first little phrase and show you different ways that you might want to solo on this thing. So it's a C minor 9, and then you're going to go down to this A raised 5th, which is going to resolve an A flat major 7th to the G, the augmented G. So maybe you might want to go, you might think of it as play the melody or you might want to go take it out a little bit. Now, when I don't think about improvising. It doesn't go through my head that I should play an F sharp or an A flat. I just feel like I want it to have integrity with the chord change, which for me is the most important and maybe only rule about improvising. So I shouldn't play, because this is a minor, so I shouldn't play the major. So the E's pretty much out for the whole thing. And unless I wanted to use the E as a note to go into some kind of the blues sort of nature. So we might play a thing like this. And then maybe play that again, but in a slightly different form, so as not to just repeat it, but to act as though that first part of the solo was the platform for the next part of the solo. So let me try that again from the beginning, and then I'll play the second phrase. You see, you build on one phrase, so I was playing. Then I played earlier, so maybe this time I want to go. Not entirely the same thing, but still has a connection to the previous phrase. So improvising without calculating is kind of the idea, but you don't want to just leave the listener listening to a whole bunch of licks up and down the keyboard like you'll hear all the time. Chop City and just kind of all kind of notes just to impress, because the whole point of improvising is to enhance the melody that you heard before and to let the chords have a huge kind of part in the play, because they're the reason for why you're where you're at in the song. And so it has to do mostly with allowing the thing to breathe. And for me, I rid my mind of thoughts. I can't think about it. I have to let my whatever this musical sense that we have as piano players come out and into the picture and take over. There's that E again. And then the end of the solo should be an ending of the solo. It should be almost like a new melody that you want to finish it. Put a little capstone on it. So I guess my best advice is to rid your mind, stay true to the chord changes, and then the rest is totally up to you. This is a little segment about what you do physically when you're sitting here at this beautiful instrument. First of all, don't act like Bill Evans. I mean, you just really don't need to lean over like this. It may give you some emotional something, but what it's going to do in the long run is really screw up your back. So try to sit up straight and try to keep your feet on the floor, and feel free to tap your feet. Don't pay attention to those people that say don't tap your feet. Tap your feet if it helps you. The other thing is learn to breathe. And I've been learning to breathe for so long, and I still make the mistake of, when I'm getting in a difficult passage, for example, I go, and I'm breathing in and holding my breath until I get to the easy part. Oh yeah. And so the idea is to allow your breath to happen no matter what it is you're doing. And it's very difficult if you're stuck in holding your breath to get through a certain period and then letting it out, then taking another breath. I still do it. But I'll tell you, if I learn to breathe naturally while I'm doing this, it makes the music better, and it makes it go faster. It makes the transitions happen faster, because I'm not holding my breath waiting for some difficult kind of passage to be finished with. So the idea, sit, relax, keep your back up, pull your shoulders back, attack the piano, and breathe. Okay, just try it. This is Don Grusin, and I hope you've gained something from what I've talked about in this allstarmusiclessons.com, and I just tell all your friends to get this thing and look at it. There's some important stuff going on, and I want to do a little promo for my big record called The Hang. It's also a DVD, which we included a lot of great people, including my brother Dave and Patty Austin and Lee Ritenour and Harvey Mason and all those guys that are, the giants. And I want to end with just playing some stuff on this piano without any idea. I'm just going to start improvising. And that's pretty much the name of this master class, is improvisation. So enjoy. you.